this week's On Texas Football Sark press conference discussion. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by CJ Vogel. CJ there live at DKR right after the press conference. This episode brought to you by our friends over at Duck Camp. Hey, CJ, I got to ask you, first things first, what you thought of the press conference. But before we even do that, I want to let people hear Steve Sarkisian's opening comments just moments ago. Matt, our producer, will you please cue the Steve Sarkisian press conference?
Proud of our players, coming off the bye with their preparation, their intent, their sense of urgency. I thought we played a fantastic first half of football. I thought offensively we moved the ball extremely well. The first drive we kind of stubbed our toe and missed the field goal, but the ball was moving well. We ended up taking the sack on third down, but I think we had over 150 yards and 14 points in the first quarter. In the second quarter, I think we had well over 200 yards and 21 points. But what I loved about it was our ability to play complementary football in all three phases, and just love the way that we played the complementary football. I love so much of what we talked about Saturday night, the fact of that we kind of can play really good football in all three phases. I think we're the only team in the country right now that's in the top 10 in offense and defense, and which is a pretty good tell. We're not number one in both, but the fact that we're really good in both, I think, just shows to the balance that we have as a football team. Our defense continues to force turnovers at a very high rate right now, and it's been a really onslaught on the football for the last month, and that's a great thing to have. Offensively, we got to continue to try to hold on to it. It's unfortunate we had the one turnover, but the fact that we turned those 3 turnovers into 21 points, I think, is big if we can continue down that road. And I touched on just a couple highlight guys from the game. I thought Trey Moore had his best game for us Saturday. I thought Alfred Collins had a great game Saturday. It was great to see Jarrett Gibson get back into the fold of what he was doing, and it was good to have Isaiah Bond and Andrew Makuba both back out there. Obviously, both had impact plays for us. So, I think Quinn, again, was a really good performance. He remains to play really consistent. I thought the last 2 ball games he's played really well. Outside of those tip balls against Vanderbilt, I thought he's played well. So things are moving in the right direction. We've challenged the guys on a few things because we know we've got a heck of a challenge going to Arkansas here Saturday. We all know about the rivalry and what it means to the University of Texas, what it means to Arkansas. Last time we went there, things didn't go so well for us. So hopefully we can put a better foot forward against them in this ball game. They've got a good football team. They're big. They're physical. They're built like most SEC teams. They've got a very explosive offense with the run game and the pass game. They've got a big physical front. They got a defensive end who's going to be a first-round draft pick in Jackson. So we've got our work cut out for us. But I like the mentality of the team already here Monday morning, with them understanding, that was a good game for us Saturday, but there's more work to be done.
CJ, you were there for the press conference. Sark obviously talking a little bit about Florida and what he was happy with, but went straight into Arkansas. What were some of your main takeaways, bud?
Well, he was in a good mood today. We got a good mood. Steve Sarkisian on Monday. Of course, that helps when you go out and you beat one of the larger named SEC teams by 32 at home. You got a lot of players on the field, but he was in a good mood today. But of course, that win only lasts you so long, and especially in a tight race in the SEC, you have to put all your attention and all your marbles towards what's coming up. And for Texas, that's a trip to Fayetteville, one that wasn't too friendly to the Longhorns when they went up in 2021, Sarkisian's first year as the head coach in Austin. But all steam ahead towards Arkansas. The team went over it in the meeting room today, kind of the history of this game and why it's so important, for the Texas fan base, for the Arkansas fan base. And they'll certainly be prepared this week of practice for a running quarterback and what's to come in that environment as well.
CJ, Sark said, I don't know. He said he told the team this morning, I don't know what Darrell K. Royal did to the Razorbacks, but they sure do hate the Longhorns. He was joking with the team a little bit about that. He also remarked about that 2021 game where Texas went up there and laid an egg of sorts, really one of the worst games of the Sark era at Texas. He said that he was asked point blank, did that game, as much as anything, teach you that you needed to upgrade your roster physically. He had a very interesting answer, I thought. He started talking about, no, it was not so much the roster. He already knew the roster had to be upgraded. It was more an understanding of the coaches and players that they got of it, of what they needed to do ultimately to be successful and meet the team where they wanted to. Other thing I thought was interesting is how many players on this current Texas team, the 2024 team, were actually in Arkansas in 2021.
Yeah, there were 11 players that made the trip to Fayetteville in 2021, 9 of which are now starters for this current Texas team. And I'm sure that they'll have a bad taste in their mouth from that last trip up to Fayetteville. And we'll be looking for some revenge and obviously to keep the bigger picture available for the Longhorns this season as well. But going back to that game, Bobby, I actually thought it was pretty interesting. Sarkisian said for as ugly as it was, for as bad as that score was at the end of the day, it was a 16-7 game midway through the third quarter. And Texas had some opportunities, especially early in that game, for that outcome to become, or at least turn into something a little bit different. But for Texas, again, for Sarkisian and the coaching staff specifically, I think the big takeaway from that trip in 2021 was, you know now what you're walking into with this Texas and Arkansas rivalry, just how hostile it'll be. Fortunately for Texas, again, I'll continue to pound the drum. The fact that game's at 11 a.m. is a big win in the favor of the Longhorns. You do not want to go play under the lights in Fayetteville, but again, it'll all be about playing to the standard of the Texas Longhorns and trying not to play overly emotional. You might get a kick out of this, Bobby. He said he doesn't like to bring in former players to talk to team ahead of big games, ahead of big rivalries, because sometimes those former players get a little emotional. So he says we're going to keep it in-house this week and go up there and handle business.
I tell you what, a couple things here. We're going to talk about turnovers next because that was a big topic of conversation today from Sark. But first, I want to say thank you to our sponsor. This episode of On Texas Football brought to you by our friends at Duck Camp. Duck Camp gear is made for the people that live for the moments out there where there are fish to catch, birds to hunt, time to kill. There are those of you out there that look forward to the opening day of hunting season and the kickoff of Longhorn football with the fervor and excitement of a 5-year-old on Christmas morning. Well, Duck Camp is here to let you know from opening day to game day, they've got you covered at Duck Camp. They believe you can't just sit around and wait for adventure to come to you. You have to get out there, stay out there, and make the most of every second. Here's the great seasons, y'all. Yes, hunting and football. Shop hunting gear at duckcamp.com. That's duckcamp.com. Christmas right around the corner coming up, guys. All right, CJ, the other thing that I took out of this was Sark's emphasis down the stretch, he said, about turnovers. He said that he has challenged his team in the bye week, challenged his team to be the number one team in the country in turnover margin the last 4 games of the season. Started out pretty good in game 1 with +2 against Florida. 2 interceptions, 1 fumble recovered against, 1 fumble against, fumble recovery against. What was your takeaway? And give people the little nugget he left out there about Jarrett Gibson and what he's up to today.
Yeah, the emphasis has been always take care of the football and take away the football. And to your point, Texas was +2, but they would have liked to have been +3. The Jarrett Gibson fumble late in that ball game probably has him on a bit of a to-do list today. And so Jarrett Gibson, the freshman running back, will be walking around the 40 acres going from class to class with the football high and tight in his arms, as they do in the movies, Bobby. That's exactly what Jarrett Gibson will be doing today. But Sarkisian said, it's one thing for muscle memory. It's another thing for it to become kind of a mentality thing. This is my football. I'm not giving it away. You're not taking it from me. He said that's kind of what I hope to see from not just Jarrett Gibson, but the rest of that running back room, because fumbles have been a bit of an ongoing thing for this running back room and Texas team in general. So the big takeaway for me when it comes to these turnovers is, hey, Texas defensively has done a tremendous job of creating negative plays for opposing offenses. Of course, we saw 2 interceptions. Started up front with Alfred Collins creating pressure. You got guys in the right spot. And then you see Trey Moore and Anthony Hill combined for a forced fumble and fumble recovery. 3 turnovers. And Texas turns those 3 turnovers into 21 points. We obviously know how important field position and turnovers are after watching the Georgia game. That changes the entire complexion of that football game as well. But that's going to be the big point of emphasis. Offensively, take care of the rock. Defensively, take that rock away. And that's what Texas has in store for them over the next 3 weeks.
One of the things he said that I thought was interesting, CJ, is he said, look, it's not just about Jarrett Gibson. And it's also him carrying that ball around is a reminder to the entire team of the importance of that ball. He says even to the coaching staff. You see something like that, it's a reminder, hey, we need to take care of the football when we get an opportunity. I thought it was interesting that the whole idea of setting a challenge just for a 4-game stretch, because he called it the number one, he called turnovers the number one stat in all of football. Very important there. He also talked a little bit about the guys that he thought were, quote unquote, players of the game on Saturday. Ryan Niblett, special teams player of the week. He said that the team cheered for that one. Also mentioned Trey Moore, as well as Alfred Collins, Jarrett Gibson, Isaiah Bond, and Andrew Makuba, among others, as having really strong outputs. But he talked a lot about Trey Moore out of Smithson Valley.
Yeah, and this is a guy, again, who the statistically might not be as impactful, but then you watch the tape and you see it's opposing offensive lines with the tight end, finding where he is on the field, shifting to him, chipping him off the edge, and making sure that he's the guy that's not beating them. And we've seen that time and time again this year, but the last 2 or 3 weeks, Bobby, I would argue has been, his prettiest day statistically, right? He had a batted pass against Vanderbilt. He had a forced fumble. And then this weekend he had a sack, 2 tackles for loss, all of which happening essentially in the first 2 drives. And then you pick up the fumble, and that's the second week in a row he's been around the ball that's been on the floor. Sarkisian called him a very intelligent football player, someone who has great instincts, but the football IQ is something that separates him from the rest of the bunch right now. And again, those sacks, those TFLs, they're coming. They did come on Saturday, but for him to be a guy that Texas can rely on in the brain and the head first is something that's very important moving forward. And he's done a heck of a job over the last 2 or 3 weeks.
CJ, Cam Williams was asked about his health. Happy to report that Sark said he was back at practice today. No lingering effects from what knocked him out of the game briefly on Saturday. So that's good. But what I thought was even better than that, because Sark acknowledged that he's probably going to be a high draft pick at some level. But he talked about his growth, not just his maturity growth, but his growth on the field from series to series. Tell folks a little bit about that.
Yeah, and this is something that, there probably were going to be some speed bumps with Cam Williams, right? It's only his first year, and for him to get some of these, first-round mock drafts, it takes time to get up to that level of play, even with the measurables, even with, some of the performances that we've seen earlier this year. One moment in that game that really stood out to Sarkisian, and he mentioned it this morning, is, Florida ran a twist. They ran a stunt where, the edge rusher kind of cut back inside, and he ended up beating DJ Campbell for a sack. Well, the two of them talked about it on the sideline. Texas and Florida, 2 possessions later, they go back out there. Florida runs the same twist, the same stunt. This time it's picked up by DJ Campbell and Cam Williams. And what happens? Texas throws a touchdown pass to Matthew Golden. So it's the little things like that where the continual reps, the continual opportunities to see what's in front of them is going to continue to elevate his game as Texas continues their season. But when you combine that, Bobby, with the brain, the intensity and passion to work in practice, but also, hey, let's not forget he's about 6'5", 340 pounds, and he can move as well as he does. That certainly helps as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, he's just a talented young man, but the capacity to improve in game is going to be very valued by the folks that are on the next level for him. They're going to certainly pick up on that on tape, I would guess. And be big. Another thing he talked about was getting Isaiah Bond and Jaden Blue back in going full speed ahead. It was talked about with Blue really feeling the best he's felt in a while and that speed being very evident. He also talked about Isaiah Bond and his speed. The other guys he said that provide a little different speed than other people, Ryan Wingo, Silas Bolden, and Trey Wisner. What did you make of that whole discussion about Sark and what he does with speed on the field?
It was really unique. He said, when your speed is strength and you're fast, you're good to go, right? And so when he then listed off about 7 or 8 different players on the offensive side of the ball that he considered to have good to elite speed. And I thought that list would go on and on and on, but it certainly helps when you're Steve Sarkisian. We've seen it already, right? Get the ball to your playmakers, let them work in space, right? It was for the second time this year, we've seen Isaiah Bond catch a screen pass and score a touchdown. Jaden Blue almost every single weekend catches a dump down, makes a guy miss in space, and goes for about 30 yards. It's very easy to see why Sarkisian is so, kind of intrigued and excited for these weapons because, again, just get them the rock. And Quinn's done a good job of that recently to allow this offensive, to create some explosive plays. But the unique speed, in my eyes, is what's really enticing moving forward, right? It's not just straight line speed. You have that with a few guys, but it's guys that can make you miss really quickly. Silas Bolden, every punt return that he has, every time that he catches the ball near the line of scrimmage, it feels like he's never hit firmly. He's never hit on the first guy. He's making someone miss and falling forward for a few extra yards. And then you see it again with Trey Wisener, 50-yard touchdown play on the screen. That's straight line speed with guys wanting to get down the field to help block. And that's offensive lineman. That's Cole Hudson. That's Calvin Banks, but also Jaden Blue running across the field to be a lead blocker. It's Gunnar Helm getting out front to go block somebody down the field. That's where speed also comes into play, Bobby. And it was on display this weekend against Florida.
I'm going to end with this today from Sark's presser because I thought it plays into a little bit of what we're looking for going forward. Sark said that 30 guys played on offense on Saturday, 34 played on defense, both among the highest this season. He said that helped him and his team this morning from a focus standpoint and carried them through practice a little bit from the standpoint of, hey, look, we've got everybody's attention. A lot of people are getting coached up from what they did on Saturday. It's one of those things. And he said that his practice performance last week was really strong, and that he feels like that is carrying over into this week so far.
Yeah, I think that's the most important part. It's one thing to go out there if you're a third string right tackle and, you watch Cam Williams and you hear Kyle Flood kind of coach him up in the film room. It's one thing to see that and hear it, right? It's another thing when you're out there for 10 snaps against an SEC opponent and now it's you on the field watching yourself in the practice field saying, okay, now I know what I need to do with my drops. Now I know where my hands need to go. Texas, 34 players on one side of the ball, 30 on the other. I mean, that's tremendous. And to do so in front of 100,000 fans, Bobby, against Florida, someone who you can sit back and say, okay, Florida's one of the big name programs in all of the country. And I was able to go out there for 15 snaps and see what I can do. That means something. And of course, in terms of what Texas wants to do long-term this year, playing potentially 14, 15, 16 games, you're going to need that depth and that experience, however small, however large, is going to play a factor. One other guy I wanted to give a quick word about, because I did ask Sarkisian about Trevor Gooseby. He was the first offensive tackle off the bench when Cam Williams went down. He said, listen, he's done a whole heck of a job kind of reshifting and reshaping his body since arriving on campus. Of course, he was kind of a long, wiry, slender, if you will, at 285 pounds for a 6'7" kid. But, the work he's come in and done with Torrey Beckton contributing, he's going to be a heck of a football player. And right now, I think that there's a level of trust in him as the quote-unquote offensive tackle number 3 behind Cam Williams and Calvin Banks. Really encouraging for the long-term, 2025, 2026 offensive line here.
All right, Sark, really with a lot of comments today about and credits to Arkansas and what this rivalry means. He had an excellent answer about that, about how this used to be the rivalry, and now it's not as well known nationally, but it's still respected by Texas and Arkansas fans. So it may not have the national appeal it once did, but certainly still has the regional appeal in the state of Texas and Arkansas. All right, that's going to do it. CJ Vogel live from DKR. Thank you, CJ. And thank you to our producer, Matt Hutchinson, who got that early part of Sark's press conference up for us. If you want to watch that and didn't start from the beginning, all you have to do is rewind and you'll hear the very beginning of Sark's press conference. All right, that'll do it for today. For CJ Vogel and our producer, Matt Hutchinson, I'm Bobby Burton. Thanks again to Duck Camp as well. And thanks to all of you. Happy Veterans Day, guys. Welcome.